Hit it, hit it.
Hi, we're going to learn how to make the drop stitch cowl today. This is the drop stitch cowl designed by Randy Cavalieri, and it is available at redheart.com as a free pattern. The great thing about this cowl is that it only uses 2 stitches, but the combination of the 2 simple stitches with this wonderful color changing yarn creates a very subtle and gradual color change effect, so it looks like all this work was put into the cowl when it really wasn't. It's the yarn that does all the work for you. If you look down here, I'm going to show you what you need to get started. For this cowl, we begin by chaining 30 stitches. So I'm going to begin by placing a slip stitch onto my hook. Once the slip stitch is onto the hook, I'm going to begin to work my chains. Now here's a little tip to keep track of your chains and to make sure they're nice and even and uniform. As you're doing your chain stitch, take your left hand and move it up along the face of the chain, so the V's. As you have these nice V's, it's a nice flat edge, and I keep moving up my left hand, and I'm putting my thumb directly on the V to hold them steady, okay? So I'm going to do that all the way along until I get 30 chains. Now, as I'm talking here, I am not counting, so I'm just going to keep going, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you how I am able to count using this yarn, because it can seem a little bit difficult with all of the color variation going on. It's a little bit harder to see all the different chain stitches that you're doing. So if I set this down and I come back here to the beginning and I can see, okay, I have this nice V as they're working along. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So I need one more because you never count the stitch that is on your hook. So I have 30 chains, but can you see how the V's are all nice and flat throughout my chain, and it was easier for me to count? It's one of the good things that you can do to be able to keep track of your stitches in this yarn. Once you have all 30 chains, you're going to do a half double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook. So for a half double crochet, you yarn over your hook and you count 3rd chain from hook. So you never count the one on your hook. So it's 1, 2, 3rd chain from the hook. You go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and you're going to draw through all 3 loops on your hook. So that's your half double crochet. Now the instructions tell you that the chain stitches that we skipped over here, they do not count as a stitch. So these chain stitches are not going to count as a stitch. So I do not want to place a marker there. I want to place a marker in the top of this half double crochet I just completed. So I'm going to take my marker, and this is a split ring marker. I'm going to stick it just through the V's at the top of the stitch I just created. What that's going to do is when I come back down my next row, I'm going to know that that's the end of my row so that I can keep everything very consistent and I get a nice straight edge. Once I've completed that first one, the instructions say that you're going to do a half double crochet in each chain all the way to the end, and you'll end up with 28 half double crochets. So right here, as I'm talking, I'm creating the half doubles. I'm yarning over my hook. Give myself some yarn here. I go into the next chain, go into the chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and draw through all 3 of them. I'm going to set this down so you can kind of see. I'm just creating a row of half double crochets directly onto my chain. Now I've already gone beyond this point. I'm going to set that aside, bring this one in. And what I've done here is this was my beginning chain. That's my row of half doubles. And then it jumps into row 2, which is the drop stitch. And that's what I created right here. And that's what I'm getting ready to create again. So once you go through one full repeat, you begin the repeat all over again. You begin with row 2 and you move on. So that's where I am in the instructions right now. So this is if I had just finished my row 4, which is virtually the same as row 1, although I'm not working into to chains. I'm working into half double crochets, and I'm beginning on row 2. So for row 2, I'm here at the end, and the previous row said I was not supposed to turn. So I finished my row, and I'm not supposed to turn. So I'm down here at the end, and it says I want to chain 1, and I need to elongate that loop, and then I'm going to grab my knitting needle, and I'm going to put that loop directly onto my knitting needle, just like that. Very similar to broomstick lace, if you've ever done broomstick lace before. Once that is on my knitting needle, I move on to my next stitch. Now, here's something to remember. You do not want to work into this very first stitch. You want to skip that one because this loop represents that stitch. So I'm going to go into the next stitch, kind of going backwards on my crochet. I'm going to yarn over my hook, pull up a loop. I'm going to chain 1. Okay, when I do the chain 1, I elongate that loop again, and I place it directly onto my knitting needle. Okay, and then I adjust and I move on. So I go into the next stitch, I yarn over my hook. Can you see that? I'm just yarning over just like normal, pulling up a loop, yarning over to create the chain 1, and then I elongate that stitch and place it directly onto my knitting needle. Now, as I'm placing these on my knitting needle, I want to make sure that they are all as consistent and uniform and at the same kind of tension, the same tension throughout, so that way you get a very solid look, very even look. Went into the next stitch over, yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, chain 1, elongate that stitch, and place it directly onto my knitting needle. And I'm going to do this all the way down the row, okay? I'm going to do it all the way up. So what I want you to do right now is continue on your own right now. Get all of your stitches picked up and placed onto your knitting needle, and please make sure that the tension on your knitting needle is as even as possible. Join me back here and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now you have picked up all of your stitches and they are resting on your knitting needle. What we need to do now is prepare this very last stitch we completed for the next row. So to do that, what we're going to do is I'm going to prepare my yarn. I'm going to pinch this stitch so that way when I take this knitting needle out, this stitch does not shrivel up and wash away, so to speak. It is going to stay where it is. So I'm pinching that stitch and I'm going to pull out my green knitting needle, which might disappear with my green screen behind me. So, so sorry. And I'm going to set that up there. Now, first thing, don't freak out because the chain 1 stitches that we did after we picked up the loop, originally our very first loop, is actually holding all of these loops in place. So they aren't going anywhere. As they're resting there, they're perfectly fine, with the exception of the last one, which is why I have it pinched. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab my working yarn and I am going to keep that pinched. I'm going to take my hook, I'm going to go into the loop, and making sure that my working yarn is at the same height as my loop that I have my hook through, I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through and I'm going to chain 1. Okay, that simple. Now all I need to do is complete a half double crochet into that very same loop. So I'm going to yarn over my hook, go into that same loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, so I have 3 loops on hook, yarn over and draw through all 3. That's it. I move on to the next loop. Now here's where I have to make a decision. If I want to have the look of my cowl where these loops are kind of twisted at the bottom, or maybe they're straight up and down, whatever you decide is absolutely fine. The designer made it so that they are not twisted. She didn't want them twisted. But if you change your mind and you want to have these loops twisted even a couple times, you could go like that and you could have that work out. The main thing is that you need to keep that consistent. But for the purposes of this particular pattern, she does not want them twisted up. So I'd make sure my loop isn't twisted. I go into the loop, yarn over, oh nope, see what I did there? I forgot to yarn over my hook. I yarn over my hook, go into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop because I need to do a half double crochet. Okay, so if I yarn over my hook, go into my next loop, make sure it's not twisted, go into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 3. Can you see? I'm just doing this all along the row. Into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 3. I'm going to yarn over my hook, go to the next loop, into the loop, yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 3. I'm beginning to get this nice row of half double crochets, and they're all the same height. All of these drop stitches are the same height. Go ahead and continue on in this manner throughout this entire row. Join me back here. I'm going to show you how to get started on the next row and to finish up this cowl. All right, so I'm at the very end, and I have half double crocheted along my entire row of dropped stitches. Can you see that? Isn't that pretty? The next set of instructions say that we need to turn our work and chain 1. Now, if you are like me and you like to chain 1 then turn, you absolutely can do that. It doesn't make that much of a difference. But this is like one of the only times you're actually going to turn your work. So we turn our work and we chain 1, and we're going to half double crochet in each stitch across. Now, this chain 1 does not count as a stitch, meaning our very last half double crochet here, we're going to work into it. So I'm going to yarn over my hook, go into my stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 3. So I do that all the way down the row. I'm going to do that a couple times here so that you can get a good idea of what's happening. I'm just going into each half double crochet that I had just completed through the drop stitches. Pretty easy, guys. If you have ever done just a half double crochet garment or whatever before, this becomes pretty easy, pretty monotonous. What's really exciting about this cowl is the drop stitch, because it really shows off this yarn, because it allows to have the yarn a little bit more room to breathe, so you get to see a lot of the color changes that happen with those drop stitches. It really is pretty. The yarn itself is lovely to work with. It's a 100% acrylic yarn, and it is just really nice to work with on the hook as it goes across, and the pretty colors make it exciting because you want to see what color changes come next and how the cowl looks next. It's pretty fun stuff. So if you noticed, I'm almost done with this entire row. I've just been talking to you guys and going down so that I could show you what to do. As I get here to the end, you'll see that I forgot to move up my stitch marker, which is fine, although it sure would have been great if I'd have moved it up. So if you're using stitch markers, please make sure you move those up after you complete your first half double crochet. It'll make it easier for you here at the end to know what is the last stitch. I know that's it right there. All right, so I'm at the end. As I set this down, you can see here's where I began. Here's my first row of drop stitches. Here's my first row of half double crochets back, second row half double crochets back, and then my second row of drop stitches, and then half double, half double. What's great, you can already see the wonderful color changes. See how it's like reddish, grayish, and then it's starting to morph into gray, pink, and yellow. And as it goes on, it'll change into more and more different colors. But the look of these drop stitches, it's just something fun. It makes the cowl itself very light and bouncy, so it's not this really thick piece you have around your neck. It's extremely warm as I'm sitting here today making this up. It's very warm, it feels really good on. It only takes 3 balls of Red Heart Medley yarn, your crochet hook, and very simple instructions, and you know how to make this cowl. For this cowl, you will repeat these instructions through row 57. Then you will fasten off and cut a tail, making sure that it's long enough to sew up the shorter edges of the cowl. That's what's going to form the ring of the cowl. Once you've done that, you will weave in your tail, snip it off, make sure it's nice and clean, throw it on, and you are ready to go out and spend the night on the town with this beautiful cowl. I think it's just beautiful on. It frames the face wonderfully, and the subtle color changes in the yarn really add something special to your outfit. You can find this pattern and more over at redheart.com. I will also include a link to the pattern in the description below and at the title card at the end of this video. If you like this video, please check out some of my others on the YouTube channel. It's right here at Marley Bird. I hope to see you back here soon, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.